And we are live. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. It is such a pleasure to actually talk face to face with you guys. And thank you to the viewers who are already on. We see that you've already got some comments up. And since our authors for this session are around the world, we'd love to hear where you're from. Drop it in the comments. We'll maybe give some shout outs. I see a Danny fan on there with Mia. Um, And so, yeah, we are live for our newest indie author chat session. And today we are bringing in some amazing five-star middle grade and young adult fantasy authors that I read in 2021. If you're new to the chat series or don't know who I am, I'm Katherine D. I'm a fantasy author and an editor and a Readsy reviewer. And Readsy is honestly where I met three of the authors that are going to be on the live tonight. Hopefully, Daniel will be joining us shortly. But I rarely give five-star reviews. I'm actually notorious for being very blunt and maybe very harsh with my reviews. But I did, out of all the books I read last year, at like 45 books a month, I gave 19 books a five-star review, which was a great year. And four of these, all four of these authors are in those lists. So we're really excited to have you here. So why don't we start just by introducing ourselves, and we'll go around clockwise, and then hopefully Daniel will have a minute to join. So C.H. Smith, why don't you start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, thanks for having me on. I'm pretty excited to be here. Some pretty good company, I'm surrounded with right here. I write under C.H. Smith. Last year was the first year I ever published anything. For heck, it's the first year I let anybody read anything, much less publish. Princess and I came out in March. My debut work. So we're getting close to its 1 year book anniversary, which we're going to do some stuff for. That's pretty exciting. And then right at the end of the year, December 27th, we put out book one of the Dragon's Honor series, Nothing More Than Zero. Uh, I'm hoping that this year coming up that I'm able to get book two and book three for the Dragon's Honor out there um, for the world to see. And then one of my biggest goals for this upcoming year, no doubt, is going to be to read more. Sometimes I get so wrapped up in my own little worlds that I'm trying to create that I don't get enough time in between the pages of a good book. So several to be reads are on the list that's in this room right now.
Nice.
Yeah, The Princess Knight actually made me cry. And I guess because I've been editing and reading so long, it takes a lot to make me cry anymore in a book. And I didn't just cry, I ugly cried for like 30 minutes at the end of the book because it started off with, oh, this isn't okay. It's obviously sort of his first book and very classic fantasy, and I love that. But then at the end, I was just like kicked through the chest. Wow. And my husband's like, why are you crying? Are you crying because of a book? I was like, yes, it's just beautiful. C.K. Sorens is on, who's another author, and she says she cried too. Yeah, yeah. For a debut, that was beautiful. I have read all your books, so I'm excited to talk about them. And hey, Daniel, thank you so much for joining
Yeah,
us
it's okay. I was
so
having
early
some
in the
trouble
morning where you
getting.
are.
Yeah, sorry early.
And we've already got some people joining in. We've got the um, we've got Luna Imagine on, and then Daniel. Your fans are here early. So we're just going around introducing ourselves a little bit. So next up, we're going around counterclockwise. Let's hear a little bit about you. And I cannot. I'm sorry. Is it Louis or Luis?
A lot of people ask me that. I go by either. So my friends call me
Okay.
Louis. My family members call me Luis because I'm Hispanic, so Luis. But whichever was easier for you guys. So yeah, echoing what C.H. Smith said, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be with you guys. Meet you guys. Um, some of you may know, first time author. I published my first novel, debut novel, in November of last year. Um, and it's been great getting a lot of feedback. It was fantastic seeing your review. And it's been quite a journey getting the book out, but I'm quite very excited about it.
Very exciting. Very exciting. And so you've got sort of the epic fantasy side with the book you put out last year,
Yeah, correct.
but with a twist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Cami, how about you introduce yourself and let's hear a little bit about you and what you write?
I'm Cami Murdock Jensen. I love stories. I've always loved stories. I have 4 little brothers and 3 older brothers, so I babysat a lot when I was growing up. And what we do is we tell stories to each other. This was before the internet was really accessible to anybody to watch movies and stuff. So we got tired of the same old reruns and made up our own stories. So what you read was the 4th book in a 5-book series called the Archmage Series. It's about the only wizard born on our planet since magic was banned thousands of years ago. And she's enormously powerful, but has no idea how to use all that magic, and comes across all kinds of magical creatures and great adventures. Super fun. And deep in the middle of book 5, which will wrap up the series, and I cannot wait to have a whole series out.
I bet. It was so exciting. If I don't remember if I said this after we went live, I think it was before we went live, that as the Reezy reviewer, we get reviews options that pop up. And when I picked up Cami's book, it was actually the first book that I had ever read of hers, and it was the 4th volume. And you could not tell that you had missed the first 3. It made me want to go read the first 3, but it was still just as entertaining picking up book 4, and I was just really blown away. And that's part of why it got a 5-star, was because so often by the time you get that far in the series, it's like, well, if you haven't read book 1, you're sort of out of luck. But it had that classic, almost that C.S. Lewis type tale to it where, okay, I didn't read the other book, but this is still just as powerful, and it was really great.
I really appreciate your review. Every once in a while, my husband will bring me his phone and he'll say, "Oh, you've got to read this review. It's really good." This was one of the ones that he brought to me. So. But I would recommend to your viewers to skip straight to book 4. Go ahead and read the first 3 first.
Yes, please go read books 1 through 3. If you haven't read them, I highly recommend reading book 1. I've already bought book 1, so I will be reading book 1 and sort of patching in the details. But Daniel, I have to say, I was so intrigued by your book before I knew anything about you because of the kappa on the cover.
Oh, so you're a big fan of Kappa as
So
well?
few people know what a kappa is or write about kappas, and being sort of bicultural Japanese American, that really picked up for me. So
Oh,
why don't
great.
you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write?
Sure. I mean, I always get a lot of comments about, is it a Ninja Turtle, which kind of annoys me, but yeah. Yeah, so I'm Daniel. I'm half Spanish, half English, and I've been writing for a few years now already. I'm on my 4th novel, I think, at the moment, but haven't quite finished a series yet, like Cami, not quite there. But yeah, Luna Reyes, which is one of the books, the book that you helped me review, is, I think, a bit of a classic kind of fantasy tale. She kind of wakes up in a different world, a little bit like Narnia maybe, or something like that. And then I tried to include lots of fantasy creatures that aren't commonly seen in other stories, like, for example, Kappa. And that was interesting because it was when I was traveling in the woods of Japan one time, and we saw this like beautiful glade, and then there was this legend and story about the Kappa there, and I found it really interesting. So I tried to include it in the story. That's how that came about.
That's very cool. Very cool. So all of your books have great aspects of fantasy for them for young readers. And so far in all our live chats, they've been for older YA or adult readers. So it's really refreshing to see middle grade and young adult represented in sort of the pure fantasy style here tonight. And I'm really curious to know what you guys have going for 2022. And if you're watching as a viewer and you have questions, please drop them in the comments and we will pull them up as they come up. We have about a 10-second lag, so if you put in a comment and it doesn't come up right away, that's why we haven't talked about it yet. But Daniel, let's go counterclockwise. We'll start with you.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about what's coming in 2022. Are you working on another volume of Luna Reyes or something else?
Yes, I'm working on the sequel to that. So that'll be the second part in the trilogy. Hopefully, it's going to be a trilogy. And I'm a bit stuck at the moment, suffering a little bit from writer's block lately. But I hope to be done with it by maybe March. So I've got most of the cover done and most of the ideas, but I'm right at the conclusion of the story, and fingers crossed, it should be quite exciting. Hopefully, a good second part to what we started in book one.
That's a lot. Do you already have a cover for the new book? Are we going to see the cover soon?
Yeah. I think I've posted a couple. I don't have the title yet for the book, so we have the cover art, but no title at the moment, which is a bit awkward.
Oh, that's normal. I think anybody who's in the writing sphere knows sometimes you just see a cover and you're like, oh, I want it. I don't even know what book I'm going to write with it, but I want that cover. Cami, what's coming up in 2022? Is Volume 5 going to come out and you have your finished series, or are you working on a different project?
Volume 5 will come out. I'll have the whole box set done. I'm very, very excited about that. But I've also started working on my next series. This was a project that I started before the Archmage series, and it just didn't come. It wasn't the right time. But it's going to be called The Lure. It's about a supernatural forest that lures in its prey by using false emotions. So I've got it mostly done. I just have to polish it up, and hopefully I'll rapid release those 3 books just as quick as possible.
Sorry, I think it cut out a second on mine, but as long as everybody else heard, that's good.
Did everybody else hear?
That sounds really good. I like that concept. Yeah.
I'm excited. See, once I find an author, somebody asked in a group the other day, how many books does it take from an author for them to become a favorite? And I was like, just one, but it's got to be really, really good. And if it hits my 5-star list, okay, I will now read everything that you put out. It's like I'm addicted. So I've actually started my year, ended 2021, started my new year with C.H. Smith's new book, which I'm sure he'll get to in just a minute. But before we get to that, Louise, what's coming up in 2022? Is there going to be a second volume of what you put out in 2021?
Yeah, definitely. The goal, and if you've seen my Instagram page, some of you might have seen it. I draw a lot of maps. You might not think, oh, is this guy an author? Because all you probably see is maps and drawings. But part of it is working on the sequel to the Grimalkin Knight. I do want to work on the sequel, conceptualizing, and you probably see one of the recent maps that I drew will be part of the story. So I do want to work on the sequel this year. I don't know if I'll be done with the sequel by the end of the year because I'm a civil engineer by day, so it's kind of a limited time to work on the novel. But my goal is to work throughout the year and maybe have it out by sometime next year. So it'll be called A Voyage into the Unknown. That's the title, and I already have an idea of where the story is going based on what happened the first one. And I don't want to spoil anything in case you guys still want to read it or picking it up.
Yeah, so I love that this year is such a writing year. I think one of the challenges of being indie is the delay, because when it's a traditionally published author, the publisher's putting out other books in between your books. So there's a whole slew of authors. But when you're an indie author, there's like that wait. As the reader, I want the book right away. But as the writer, it's like, I'm working as fast as I can. And it's not coming out as fast as I want. And if you're watching and you didn't know, I think all of us are indie authors and or hybrid authors, which means we've self-published some and we've traditionally published others, which means most of us have day jobs um, that are not around writing. So you're squeezing writing in little places here and there. Um, but the good thing about going on lives like these is we can open up and say, hey, if you like Louise's book, you will probably like Cami's book, and you're probably going to like C.H. Smith's book and Daniel's book. So check them out. But C.H., tell us what's coming in 2022, because you released Nothing More Than Zero not that long ago. And
Right.
it's really good. It's a totally different feel than The Princess Knight.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit and go to The Princess Knight. We're going to do the 1-year book anniversary for it, and we're going to make it a big deal, and we got some exciting stuff coming there. But The Princess Knight, it was written from a different place than the Dragon's Honor series and Nothing More Than Zero's book 1 in that. But we have some familiar characters out of The Princess Knight that come into it. Your 2 lead characters, Jackson and his dragon, do make a appearance in The Princess Knight. It's so funny. The Princess Knight started out as was supposed to be a short story, part of a larger work, and it just ballooned into what it is now. I mean, it's not a huge book; it's still a small book, but what it is now. And then out of it came Daniel and came Jackson and Zero, 2 characters I had never thought of before in my life until I'm sitting at the desk writing The Princess Knight. And out of it's coming a series. I'm planning on 4 books. May end up being 5. Again, my books are kind of short, quick reads, but it's a little more traditional fantasy, young adult fantasy than the embedded narrative that The Princess Knight was. But this year, I've got 2 major focuses in my writing. I want to get book 2 and 3 out of the Dragon's Honor series. Tentative title for book 2 right now is Only 3 Temples. It's a little more introspective of a novel versus the adventure novel that Nothing More Than Zero was. And then I'm also wanting to really focus on my author business a little bit. I did it backwards. I don't have a newsletter. I don't have a huge social media presence. So we're going to work on those 2 things a little bit this year too. I have met some amazing indie authors out there. And you feel very, very comfortable in this community, and I want to capitalize on that a little bit this year.
Yeah, it's really a great community. I've been shocked. I've only been doing this. I feel like newbie among all of you guys. My debut novel came out last July, and I was not expecting the response that it had. And when a couple weeks after it came out, it hit Amazon bestseller list, I was just like, I was overwhelmed. And I attribute all of that to the readers and the writers in the community, especially Instagram. So if all the viewers, we wouldn't be here without you guys. So that's what this is all about. Mia says, everybody likes dragons. Yes, there's some really interesting creatures in Cami's book and Luis's book too. Like we've already talked about Kappa, and there's some other creatures in Daniel's that are really, really interesting. But Cami, there were creatures in your book that I was like, I don't know what that is.
Like which one?
Mostly the take on I don't know how to describe it without spoiling it for people, how the earth is almost alive in a way, and the genie and the prophecy in there. I was just like, this is incredible. I mean, and then Luis, your main character is really unique.
Right. So I think it might feel like new, but at the same time, it's a bit traditional. So when you read about the main characters, you feel like, oh, I've never read from this sort of character's perspective, but it feels like a traditional, like a fairy tale type of character.
Right.
So that was kind of the idea behind it. Make it new, but at the same time relatable. Like you think about it, and you're like, oh yeah, this feels like a traditional tale.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, definitely, it didn't take away from anything in the story. It just makes it that much more intriguing, and it's easy to put yourself in the shoes of those characters.
Right. And I think part of the character being, kind of like a small, defenseless, talking cat is that
Yeah.
you can relate to him because he's kind of scared at times, and so you kind of relate to that because part of your life being scared of different things.
Yeah, and when you hear that, is it Grimalkin? Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
You thought it was too?
So yeah, Luis's main character is a Grimalkin, the Grimalkin Knight.
We both have a Grimmel too, but he's a talking cat.
Oh, okay.
I love it. So yes, and just because it sounds, oh, that's a talking cat, it is in no way comedic or lighthearted because of him being a Grimalkin. It's literally just like any other really epic hero that has to grow into the knighthood that he's found himself with. Yeah, I've dropped everybody's Instagram links in the chats too, so everybody can like follow everyone on Instagram and see what you write. But one of the questions we've been carrying through January that I'm really curious about here is how did you get into this specific genre? Why write for middle grade? Why write for young adult? You're obviously all super creative and great with world building and great with character arcs. So why go after the younger readers with your stories? And I'll just toss that out there for whoever wants to answer first.
I can take seconds. Oh, Tammy, you go first.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. So the biggest reason that I went for this genre is because of my day job. I'm a director and I teach youth theater. And so I'm always telling stories with kids, always. And even when we're just sitting backstage, waiting to tell the story to the audience, I'm telling stories to the kids to keep them interested. And so there are some stories that are just too big for the stage. And so this one I wrote mostly for my daughter. We found out that she had some chronic illness, had no idea what it was, doctor after doctor after doctor, and she just could not find any motivation to get out of bed. And so she's just as creative as I am. So I said, all right, I'm going to write this story, but I need some advice. Why don't you come for a walk with me? If you can't make it to school today, let's at least go for a walk and let's talk about what we can do with this story. Well, those walks that we took during this creative process gave her more and more strength and more motivation that she can do hard things even if she doesn't feel good. And so that's where it started for me. And so my main character, Agnes, is based on my daughter, who is married and is now pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And she's pregnant with her first daughter, and she's going to name her, Molly Agnes.
Oh,
My book.
that is so sweet. Oh my goodness, that reminds me so much of C.H. Smith's Princess Knight.
Oh,
I don't want to spoil it, but that reminds me a lot. And that seems like similar to you, CH. You had a story about a young person that inspired yours too.
Well, it's so weird. We have these connections that happen, and then the older you get, it's harder to keep them, solidified. But social media does a great job of allowing us to at least be a part of other people's lives, even if it's just in the shadows. And an old friend of mine, her and her daughter battled some pretty serious issues, and just this book was more about her mother's strength, how she got up every day and how she continues to get up every day and face the world. It's just unreal, and that's where that book definitely came from. The reason I write to the age group that I target is I want my kids when they're old enough to read, and I've got a bunch of them. They're all 5 or younger, and there's a bunch of them. But when they get old enough to read, I want them to read it as soon as possible, and I want them to be able to be proud of it as soon as possible. So that's kind of why I target this age group. The book that inspired me the most when I was their age is definitely not a fantasy book, Where the Red Fern Grows, which is about a couple hunting dogs, but it's also a very powerful tale that I I think all children should have to read at some point or another. It's a very powerful tale. And I think that helps children deal with some of the issues they face. Whether we want to shelter our children from them or not, they're going to face those issues. And I think books are a great way to help them do that.
I agree with that 100%. Vicarious learning.
Yeah, totally. And sorry, Daniel, I know I sort of cut over you for a second, but those just tied together so much.
That was both very good, very interesting answers. I don't know if I
So
can
how did
follow
you
up
get
that now.
into writing this? So how did you get into writing young adult, middle grade?
So I'm a teacher in a school, so a bit like Cami, I'm around children a lot. And for me, it's just I wanted to write stuff that I thought the kids would be interested in reading. And I've had a nice reaction to the book so far by the children of a few of my friends who have really enjoyed reading the stories and written and drawn like artwork related to the stories and stuff like that, which has really pushed me to kind of keep going on. The other thing is I also try to, even though it's middle grade fiction for the most part, it's aimed at younger children. I do try to include stuff that can be appealing to adults too. So kind of stories within stories, or maybe things that the children might not get when they read the book, but there's references to real world events or veiled references to other stuff that might appeal to adult audiences a bit more. That's what I'm kind of going for.
I love that. And then the adults can have a chat with their kids and talk about these things.
Exactly. That's the hope. It's difficult to do to get right, but yeah, that's what I'm going for. Hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's true in all four of your books. Is your books tackle adult issues in a way that is. There we go. Your books tackle adult and heavier issues in a way that's still light enough for a child to read and easy to understand. Is that dialogue up for conversations with parents? Like I know CK Sorens. Yeah, I've got you on the live. CK Sorens is on, and I've actually seen her say about one or two books in reviews, because I read her reviews a lot, that it's books that she can't wait to discuss with her kids. And I've always thought that that's just so great when you can read a book, you've read a book together, you both sort of pull different things away from that book, and then you can compare and hear what your kids got out of it through their eyes, and it can sort of grow with them as they get older. And Louise, I think that's a really good point for yours too, because there is stuff all the way up for adults in yours too, like everybody else's here, that had me scratching my head and thinking a little bit. So how did you end up going YA/middle grade, somewhere in there with Grimokin?
I think it's mainly because from a young age, I always loved reading like fairy tales, like Brother Grimm's stories, short stories, things that are usually targeted for kids, like The Boy Who Cried Wolf and all that, all those short stories that taught kids messages. So I loved those stories as a kid. I remember in grade school we had like this annual class assignment to encourage kids to learn to read and write. So up to that time, it was write your own story, and I love that time of year. So I remember at the time I was influenced by The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So I wrote a short story called The Lost Ring, obviously influenced by The Lord of the Rings. I think ever since then I've had this idea in mind. I sort of shelved it for a long time, and just a few years ago, when I was in college, I happened to find that book I once wrote, and that sort of lit that fire open, and I started writing. And I think just thinking about my when I was younger, reading these stories, that's why I sort of leaned towards a younger audience. But like you said, some of the themes that are covered in the story, are also something that an adult can pick up and read with their kids and sort of guide them through it, because there's some dark things in the story that some kids might might be confused about, or might have questions about, their life death situations. So, but I think it's certainly something that a kid can pick up, and an adult can also read with their kids as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you hear me typing, I'm actually dropping the links to these books in the chat for the readers because it's quicker to access, just to be able to click it right there. All right, so we've got one last question, and I know we're about at time. So, are you thinking of going traditional publishing with any of your series at some point, or are you happy with indie publishing? And if you do go traditional, would you still self-publish some of your books?
I'm happy with the indie stuff. I love it. I love being in control. I love picking my art, and I love picking my editors, and I'm gonna stick with indie. I really like it.
I'm not real sure. I don't know what I don't know. So I don't even know if I'm gonna finish this series this year, next year, or the year after. And we're gonna play it by ear and see where it goes. We're gonna play it book by book.
I've been thinking about that recently. I might be trying to. I think I'm going to try to maybe give traditional publishing another chance lately, because I've been finding that I'm not that good at the marketing aspect or in the promotional aspect of indie publishing, and it's taking a lot of work, and I always still have a full-time job. So yeah, I might try at some point this year to send out some query letters and see how that goes. But yeah. For the time being, still indie, but we'll see.
Yeah, for me,
That's awesome.
I think for the time being, I'll stick to indie, but I agree with some of what Daniel said. I think some of the challenging things that I found with indies, marketing the book, and that's sort of become like a job in itself. So, but for the time being, I think I'll stick to indie. We'll see what results I get, and depending on that, we'll see.
I really love your maps, by the way. Your maps are awesome. I think your drawing is super cool. Yeah, on your Instagram. Great.
Yeah. Well, this has been so amazing, and thank you everybody who's viewed the whole time, and thank you so much. Like I said earlier on the call, we've got people who've joined from all over the world, and like Daniel's up in the early part of the morning, and other people are up really, really late at night. Mia has a parting sentiment: don't give up, guys. And it doesn't sound like anybody's going anywhere. We're all writing away. 2022 has been a big writing year. And while I don't personally write a whole lot of young adult, I tend to lean more into new adult, which is for like 18 to 23. I love to read it, and I always have, and it will always have a special place in my heart. So I pick up a good bit of it on Readsy Discovery, and I dropped the Readsy Discovery links in the chats. If you guys are wondering what these things are that are coming over that say Readsy, it really helps visibility on people's books. You read a review and you like the review, to upvote the review. There's still books that had a lot of upvotes last year that are getting re-shown. So if you check out some of the reviews for Luis and Cami and Daniel that are on Readsy Discovery and want to upvote it, that'd be great. C.H. Smith's book I didn't get through Readsy Discovery, but I've got a review on Amazon and Goodreads that you can see if you click on his Amazon link that I dropped. And reviews are always appreciated. They're sort of what keeps us going, helps us from wanting to give up. But thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening or day. And it's been such a pleasure. Take care.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.